House, New Delhi. I, Dr. Rubina Pradhan, Assistant Professor, Center for Research in Social Sciences and Education, JAIN, University, Bangalore, will be moderating the session today. Thank you for being a part of this workshop. I request everyone present here to make the session very interactive so that we all can learn from each other. So you all are free to use the chat box or raise a virtual hand for any queries, suggestions, or feedback, or anything you want to present or share during the presentation period. The session is of 1.5 hours, of which I would like Dr. Sakhi to present for 1 hour and half an hour for discussion. So without further ado, let me introduce the topic. The topic for this session is how to write a research paper in social sciences and policy-based subjects, and also on how to publish research papers in high-indexed journals. Okay, Dr. Sakhi has started sharing. Let me just continue before she starts. So the major objective of the session would be to carry out research. At the end of the session, the participants would be able to carry out research in social sciences following proper research techniques and to write a comprehensive research papers which is ready for publication. And another objective would also be to able to identify high indexed journal and reputed journals for publication. So let me first formally introduce Dr. Sakhi before she take on the floor. Dr. Sakhi Roy is a graduate in economics from Jadavpur University and master's MPhil from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. She presently is an assistant professor at Amity University, Kolkata, and also resource person for Masters of Public Health Program of National Institute of Public Health Training and Research, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. She has authored a total of 37 publications. Welcome, Dr. Sakhi Roy. The floor is all yours.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rubina. I know you're from the same alma mater. So that's what Dr. Firdaus have told me. So thank you for that kind introduction. And thanks to both Dr. Firdaus and Osman for inviting me for this session. So this is the inaugural session. So we will start with, a very, very important part of any research journey is about writing research papers. So I'll go like really hands down on the understanding from the very basic. So, I'll just assume that no one knows anything about it. So, and that's what will be my approach so that anyone at any point, if you have any doubts in any of these sections, so that, it's a revision for every one of us and not to forget, the key integral portions that we need to discuss in writing any research paper. And also towards the end, I'll be highlighting on, journals and how to get the publication, how to identify good journals and work towards it. So I'm very sorry, I just, by accidentally shared my screen, but I'll be formally starting with the presentation. So I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, it is visible.
Yeah, I had just closed the presentation, but yeah. Yeah. So we'll start with the very, you know, basic aspect of a research paper, and which is about the key points that one should remember when you are starting with writing any of the applications and papers. So this is the topic. This is my affiliation, which ma'am has already mentioned. So the first thing, and we'll just discuss about the general guidelines that one should follow when you're writing any good social science research paper. The first and foremost portion of it has to be with identifying the topic. Now, I know, that's what most research scholars struggle, like deciding on the topic. And I remember when I was choosing one, I started with a general area, and then when I was trying to specify, I found people have already worked on it. So the first thing that you should try to do is first select a general area of interest that you would like to investigate. And then it is very important, and I truly agree with what the keynote speakers have said, Dr. Yadav and Samriti ma'am, is that the research, the area that you are looking at has to be like really significant, right? What are the things that you're trying to bring out through your research? So look at the current debates, that is there in that particular area that you've chosen, and then try to choose to boil down to specific questions that are of interest to you. Very important is also keeping in mind the practicality of the question. So, what you're trying to address, whether you will be able to finally be able to come up with that work. So practicality is very important. And remember, it's just a research paper. You have limited time to complete the project. So these are very important aspects. And I remember my supervisor, when we are choosing topics, every day I used to go and, tell him a topic. I used to find that some work is already done and all, and it was going long. And sir one day just sat me down and said that, remember, you're not writing this paper to get a Nobel Prize. So, be practical in what you want to do. Select an area, be concise, and try to answer the question. So, look more towards the question that you want to address, and then, look at the topic. So, these are a few of, the practical tips that I can suggest to anyone who is starting off with research. um, there are a few points that you should keep in mind. One is that uh, the subject that you're choosing should not be too overdone. And that is what, we end up many a times doing, that you normally choose areas which have been and a lot of work has been done. Now, the point is, of course, you can do it. But to find a gap in those areas becomes very difficult. So, to throw new light to that area would become challenging. So try to find areas, in which you have expertise, but also which are new to explore. Because by the time you do your research, you do your, PhD, you have new areas to explore. Now, it's better to, for limited time period when you're working on, better not to work on controversial subject, but it's a choice. Like, of course, you can bring in debates and avoid too narrow or too vague problems. Now, this is one of the practical problems that we face, and for students, especially, like not for research scholar, but what we see, students sometimes come up with areas which they think is, very important and which needs research, but it's so vague, right? You don't know exactly how to get it done. You just are interested in that topic and you end up choosing it. So remember that practical aspect of it. And also, the subject that you've selected, of course, there should be some amount of familiarity and feasibility in that area. So it becomes easy for you when you're finally doing the research. The other few points that you should also, keep in mind is the importance of that subject, your qualification, your training in that area. Now, if you're doing field-based experiments or, in generally experiments, there's sometimes cost is involved. So there's cost factor, there's time factor. So all these should be kept in mind when you are deciding on a topic. So speak with your supervisor, look at the kind of projects that he or she might have, and kind to walk around in those areas. So few questions that you should ask yourself is, whether you are equipped in that background to carry out that research. Now, sometimes some areas are not in our domain. Of course we can learn, but think that whether I'll be able to learn that new area and then again, complete the research or the work in that stipulated time that I have. Right. And also, of course, the budgeting aspect of it should be taken care of. Whether I'll get the necessary cooperation that needs to be done, because sometimes, the subjects that we are dealing with, whether they will be willing to participate in this kind of research that we are doing, right? So these are some of the practical aspects that one should keep in mind. So, if you think all these goes in your favor, then, it's really good. You should start with that. And before any, when you're doing any field-based work, it's always good to test your idea. So do a preliminary study or a pilot study before. And if you get like, you're getting the kind of responses that you were expecting, then that helps you in going forward. So always have a small study, a pilot study before you start with your major research. Now, we'll give you a few tips on how to, how you can develop these kind of problems that you're thinking of. So, of course, as I told you, you select the topic of your interest, and then you choose a topic which is, yeah. So then you choose the topic which is on your visible focus area. Get the help required, like to start with, when you're thinking of working in that area, you review drafts, you start working on it, and you start off with a general idea. Of course, then you need to review the area, and with that you kind of refine the problem that you have. So the steps that we always follow is that, when you're designing a research problem, we try to do it in a systematic manner. So what we start is we first write the statement of the problem. Right, so you start with a general statement of the problem that you're trying to address. So, what is the issue that you are trying to address? Understand the nature of the problem. So, suppose you're dealing with poverty or multidimensional poverty or issues of health or financial inclusion. First, write what is the problem that the area is facing. Understand the nature of the problem, then go and survey the literature that is available. So, what are people saying about that problem? And then from there, you develop the idea. Of course, you discuss with the people, you discuss with the other authors who have written about it, and from there you can develop or rephrase and come up with a much polished research problem, and that becomes a working proposition. Now let's understand this with an illustration. So this is an example, just a small example. So suppose I want to understand, and this is the topic that I've selected, right? So why is productivity in Japan so much higher than in India, right? So we know that Japanese people are somehow very productive, and there can be various reasons why productivity in Japan is higher. Now, can anyone tell me? You can write in the chat, or you can speak up and say, what do you think? What is a problem or few of the problems with this kind of research topic? Or is there at all a problem?
Ma'am, getting the data will be challenging.
Getting the data. Okay. Anything else? Any other ambiguity that you observe?
uh, Productivity, when they say what
Hmm.
it is, it's very vague. I mean, in the
Right.
sense,
Right.
what type or what you do you mean industrial productivity or total factor productivity or output? What do you mean?
Exactly.
Labor productivity, yes.
It's an open
Exactly.
topic. It's an open topic. A vast
Yeah.
amount of data is required.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like
Right.
for what industry they're talking about, like
Exactly.
for the industry or for the agriculture thing or for any other thing.
Right. Yeah. So very good, right? So we understand, right? So these topic has a lot of ambiguities, as one of the participant has rightly pointed out. Like, what sort of productivity are we talking about? So what is that we are referring to? And then we just said Japan, but what kind of industry, because in Japan there can be various industries, and maybe not in all industries Japan is, having higher productivity, right? So what are the kind of industries that we are speaking of related to? And the problem that many of you have mentioned about data, and it comes from the fact because we have not mentioned any time period. So it's long, like you don't know from when you are comparing, so the time period that also is very significant in any topic. So the time period that you are talking about is also very important, right? So these are few of the ambiguities that,
Don't
yeah, any other queries? Right? So all these points, how we need to rethink, we need to discuss, and we come up with much refined topics. So now, you know, let me refine it, and given the inputs that you all have presented, I reframe it to what factors were responsible for higher labor productivity of Japan manufacturing industries during the decade, right? And from 1971 to 1980, relative to India's manufacturing industry, right? So now do you think is it complete? So is there still any problem with the
Like, ma'am,
research
for
question?
how many industry they are talking about, the specific we are going to take as a sample or uh, as a domain.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
This this can be good in the sense research objective, but not
Mm.
a title for a
Yeah. So here
research
we,
paper.
yeah, of course. So we are trying to understand here, the factors which are responsible. We have pinned down to labor productivity. We have mentioned that we are selecting only the manufacturing industry. We have mentioned the time period. But there is still gap, right? So the problem, as someone has rightly mentioned, that within the manufacturing, right, we need to understand a practical aspect of it, that operational aspect, that there can be several manufacturing industries. So from there, we need to select, right, the 15, maybe so 15, 16, whatever it is, the selected manufacturing industries. So we are trying to understand these aspects. So whenever you are trying, as uh, scholars, and you will see when your PhD thesis titles get confirmed, these are aspects which are very important, right? So the time period, which industries, what are the specifications that you're working on. All these aspects need to be there, in your working title. So always remember these, key aspects. And this is just a simple illustration to uh, remind these concepts. Okay, so now the question comes to, once you've decided on the topic, is to search for the topic, right? Now, what are the common places that we all search for our
Yes,
topics?
I'm sorry to interrupt
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Somebody is saying that your voice is little low. Could you please
Okay. Yeah, sure, sure. Actually, uh, yeah, I'll try to be louder, but there is a rainfall happening in this area, so I think the connectivity is
clear
also
to me?
a
I think
problem.
participants, maybe it might be their problem as well. It's
Yeah,
audible.
okay. Sure. I'll try to be louder. Okay.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
audible clearly now.
okay, sure. Thank you. Yeah, so, the others who are into research, so what are the generally the places, the databases that you all look forward when you're searching for topics?
A Google Scholar.
Google Scholar, right? Google Scholar, of course, um, and anyone who works in public health or in those areas. So PubMed is also a very good place for when you're looking at any health related information. If you have people from psychology, then there are good places to start off your social science and medicines, and there are lots. Right. So what we do in Google Scholar, and this is just an illustration that you go to Google Scholar, you write the topic, and a very good feature here is the filtering. Right. So use the filtering options that are available. So, you can um, search from since 2024 or sort by date or by relevance so that the most cited papers comes first than the others. So make sure you use these filtering to understand and filter out the correct information. The other place which also you can use and look out for, especially those who are working in areas of health or public health or related to it, is PubMed. And this is how your PubMed looks like. I have used an illustration. So the agenda, I hope few of you must have heard about it. So it is a government scheme to promote institutional delivery in India. So once you type this, you see there are a lot of filtering options that are available. So abstract, full text which are available, and many others. Right? So you can also fix on the timeline and check for publications. Right? So this is a very good way of getting the correct paper. So never like as students we should be very careful about where we search information from. Okay, so these are different illustrations, so you can use this full text versions to search for it. Now, of course, once you have your material ready, then of course you need to read closer. Now, the approach towards reading should be that, of course, you read the abstract first. And, when you're reading the abstract, that gives you an idea about overall what the paper tells you about. When you're reading the introduction, remember to understand why is that study important, right? And it will provide with you sometimes, mostly in the publications, literature reviews are not many a times written separately, so it's part of the introduction only, so you get understanding of the relevant literature. Method. Now, of course, method is very important in research, and econometrics and method, everything is very important, but what you should focus on is trying to understand why was that particular method chosen, right? Understand the nature of the data, understand the relevance of that method which was chosen. So it's more about not just you keep up in your mind, I just want to use an SEM or some method like mediation analysis, and whether my data requires that, I don't look into it. So whenever you're reading any method section, read it with a critical eye, understand the measures, understand the procedure, understand how it was eh, collected, and then understand why it was used and whether it was just or not. Whenever you're reading any research paper, always be critical. Right? Don't believe what they are saying. Try to understand if what they are saying is correct or not. Right? Always be critical about it. Do not believe whatever they are saying. So, and then, of course, you build your own conclusion and also see whether that conclusion is logical or not, because that is how you identify the gaps, right? So, whatever discussion they have said, and whatever is the limitation that they have mentioned, there lies your main work. Understand what are the limitations of their study, and understand, where they might have gone wrong, and that gives you the gap for your research, right? So whenever you're whenever I always tell students that whenever you're reading paper, in your mind, it should always be what did not do, right? What is still left, right? So that is how we find the gaps. So we read, of course, you have to read critically to understand these problems and how they have framed the question. Was there any problem? Debate. So it comes with reading more, but be critical in that. And of course, whenever you're reading, and that's why, I always tell to sort it by the latest papers, because recent papers will give you, and if you go to the bibliography section or the reference section, they give you idea about all the work that has already been done, right? And that gives you an idea about, where the what started it and what have been the gaps that has been fulfilled and what is, the current status. Right? So read the recent papers in that area and read the references of those section, and that gives you a very good idea of where you should start. So this is how, we kind of refine the questions, bring about clarity. These are usually the, steps that we follow. Now, of course, when you're publishing in journals, journal to journal, there will be variation, and we have to keep those in mind. So there will be introduction. Sometimes most of the journals, introduction, literature review is clubbed together. Sometimes it can be separate also. Methodology, findings, and results. Now, there is a difference between finding and results, and findings and discussion, right? There's a very crucial difference between them, and one should not use the other. So there's no, it's separate, right? And then conclusion, then referencing style, and appendix, of course, appendix if you have any other additional tables or charts and figures. Now, I didn't know the background of most of the people, and I didn't get time to discuss also. So I'm not very sure about, your level of working in papers and your understanding. So what I'm saying is a very generic and a general introduction. If you have questions, of course, I'll try to clear many of the doubts or come up with even further discussion. So, in introduction section, and I assume many of you have written papers. So, what is the thing that we generally write in an introduction? So, those who have written, right? So, what are the general idea that we put in an introduction section?
First, we begin with a brief background.
Yeah,
Then,
right.
then slowly we move into the problem, and
Right.
and and maybe within the introduction we can also have a section of called st- statement of purpose as to
Hmm.
why this
Hmm.
research is necessary.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. Very good. Thank you. So this is, Sir has very aptly mentioned. So in a general introduction section, what we build is first we give the general statement of the problem. So you try to bring about and discuss a basic background of, the current status of what is happening. Right. So suppose what is happening in the industry, what is happening in that particular sector or in that particular area, and then you build up, right? You explain the gaps that are there, and you try to boil down to the fact that this is a relevant and an important, area to work on, and why is this important. And sometimes in introduction, we also state the principal results of the study and the conclusion. So, whenever you're writing any report or dissertations, so that is also done. Now, review of literature review, many a times in, when you're publishing, it comes with the introduction. Sometimes, it's separate. It depends on journal to journal. Literature review is very important, and in the sense, like you can write review papers also, right? So the thing that we should remember, when we are writing any literature review paper, is that you cover all the aspects, right? So many a times we just focus on the maybe immediately what are the things that are required in the topic, but what you should also bring about is not only the discussion of, suppose you're working on women empowerment, right? So first, speak about from where did this woman empowerment term or definition, what has been the history, what has been the development in the theory, how has it developed, over the years, and then you bring about the connections, right? Between similar research, what has been the contradictions that have been found. So, how have some people defined it versus what have others done it? So that you establish to the reader that you understand the topic, you have thoroughly checked what has been done till now, right? And what are you adding new to it, right? So the last part of literature review is always the addition to the literature, right? So literature reviews, of course, you survey all sort of scholarly articles, books, sources, you write a short description. And many a times, I hear like students tell me, ma'am, like how many papers should I review? And my question is, that does not matter, because it is not about reviewing 10 papers or 20 papers. It is about reviewing uh, the right amount. You could come up with one area which is so new that you don't have enough material. Then, from where will you get 10 papers in that case? So then you should come up and mention about how this area has developed, like what are the things that have been done, and or if it is derived from some place elsewhere, right? So how has that movement been? So whatever is required for explaining that topic, that area, those number of papers should be reviewed so that you bring about that contradictions, you bring about um, the gaps, right? So that should always be the approach, right? So do a thorough, like, understanding about that area before you start off, because the problem is the moment you start working and finally you fix on a method, you do it, and later you find that someone has already done it, then your entire research falls flat. So it's very important to keep update on what is happening in that area, what has people already done, keep a track. So suppose you're working with secondary data like NFHs or NSSO or areas. So understand who are the people who are also working on it. Keep a track on what is being done. We have seen like I've seen one of my seniors who was working very hard one one of his chapters, and it was a secondary data source. And before he could submit, someone has already published work which was very similar to what he was doing. So his entire chapter was not relevant. So it is very important that you are very much aware of what is already being published. And if you're using secondary sources, it's even more important to keep track of it. So knowledge of the methodologies and how it is done. Literature review, I hope you'll be taught in details. There are different ways of doing it, but of course the correct way of using it is to do it thematically. Place ideas, bring about that contradiction, explain the theory, explain the trend. So this is more or less the approach that is used by most, and that is what we should follow, right? So
Sorry to interrupt, ma'am.
yeah,
Ma'am.
yeah.
I think you're not able to see the raised hand on your screen. This is Dr. Sunaina from UAE. While we are on the topic of literature review, could you please elaborate on that case where you don't have adequate number of studies on the topic that you've chosen? Because I've
Right.
really hit a roadblock there. So how do we go ahead in that case?
Yeah, sure. So I briefly said about it, and
Yes.
I think the others would also be able to, and we face this many a times. So what we suggest is you understand where it comes from. So suppose it's a new area that you're working on, but it derives from some concepts of psychology. Suppose I'm speaking about behavioral economics, right? So there is a background of psychology, and from there maybe we are bringing that idea, or it might be econophysics. So there was some work that was done in physics, and we are trying to bring that area into our work. So then we can also highlight the work that has been done in physics or in psychology, and how we incorporate those concepts like into our research. So then we don't have much literature, so you can only cite one or two papers maybe in that area that you have worked on, but you have some other places from where you can bring in that analogy, bring in the trend, bring in um, how it has evolved and what we want to do. And I think journals, they're kind, like they understand, what are the work that has been done and what are the areas that are coming up. So that way, you don't need to mention many of the literatures because it's not available. So it's not possible for you to mention something which is not done. But bring the background, bring from where and how you are coming to that area. So I think if that is done in a proper justified manner, I think you'll be fair enough. Maybe, ma'am, I can ask like what could be that area so that I can give more specific answer. Like,
Yes, it is the impact of artificial intelligence usage on cognitive flexibility.
yeah, right. So of course, AI, everyone is working with AI, and there are a lot of work that is done. And since I'm uh, being part of any university, you have department like computer science department, psychology, economics, and everyone is working towards it. So I think one should when you're working in it, there are keywords that you have, right? So you have a literature of AI, you have a literature on your psychological aspect that you're speaking of, right? And then you're trying to integrate, so include those references of those areas, and then bring about when you are bringing out the contradiction, or if you're bringing out that area which is not explored, and then you bring out what can be done or what has been explored, and where the gap lies. For you can write more on gaps, and
Right.
then what has been done, what has not been done, you can write more.
True, true. Right.
Right.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you for
Dr.
asking
Sakhi,
the yes.
shall we take the question and answer session towards the end because we are
Yeah,
running
yeah.
minutes.
I think that would be better. So
Yes, yes. So maybe we can take another 10 minutes for you to wrap up, and
yeah,
then
sure.
so maybe we can
Yeah.
have more discussion in the question and answer session.
Yeah. So, this is more or less the outline that we follow. And this is a very, of course, an important area of discussion. And then comes your methodology. Now, of course, you have extensive sessions on different methodologies. So I'm not going to discuss, though, I teach econometrics, statistics. So I love taking these papers. Um, but what you remember, what you should always remember from any methodology section, and that what brings you more citation is you write the method section very well, right? So that anyone, can replicate exactly if they follow your work, they can replicate it. And that brings good citation. So if you are not explaining your method, your variables, your creation of that variable, from which variable, how you have done, what is the weighting, everything with precision and with details, it should be mentioned. And that brings about more citations. So always be very, very particular about writing the methodology section, the method sections very well. I hope you all know the difference between methodology and methods. So I would not go into details. And then comes the findings. So findings or results, like a journal to journal, you might have difference, is just stating what you observe, right, from your data. So if you are using a hypothesis, you state whether you reject or you fail to reject that hypothesis. You should be clear that you have properly formatted tables and charts to substantiate the claims. They are short, they're effective. You have not unnecessarily used too much of paragraphs or charts, like double duplication. Sometimes you include tables as well as charts. That should be avoided. You should identify whether a chart is important in explaining that concepts, or a table, or whatever is the relevant one, powerful one, should be used. Then comes discussion. Now, whenever you're writing a discussion section, remember, and see many a times, many of my students, that there's no difference between result and discussion. Sometimes, the things that you have written in result is exactly what you end up writing in discussion. That is not the case. Discussion is what you mean by these findings, right? So you offer generalization, you offer principles, you bring in the relationship. So suppose you have got a positive impact of, suppose, digitalization, right, on financial inclusions, right? So you bring about people who also got that similar result, or you bring out people who had contradictory results. You develop paragraphs in which you bring about the themes, the trends that you have observed, right? And if there is any lack of correlation, that you have got a result which is not supported by the literature, you have offered some exceptions to it. So these are the things that we should bring about in the discussion, right? So how your research agrees and disagrees with similar and prior studies, this is what we write in the discussion, right? And then conclusion. Some of the journals, if you in life sciences, they don't have conclusions, but in social sciences we have. So we restate, like, a conclusion should be, you know a actual conclusion, right? In the sense, and this I've seen like many a times, that students tend to write a very generic conclusion. So in your result you have found something, but in your result section it is very completely different. A conclusion should be exactly highlighting your research question, what was your hypothesis, and what did you find from your data. Nothing other than that. No generic conclusion about the topic that you have. Like, suppose one is working with AI, it should not be a generic AI conclusion. It should be based on what you have found from your paper, right? And that helps you develop the recommendations, right? So policy recommendations is very important, especially in economics and other areas as well. So that helps you. So if you have found the correct factors, that helps you in recommending policy. So look, these are the factors I found is important for financial inclusion. So therefore, you should start working on this area. So that's the recommendation. Yeah. So this is how we kind of develop, and I'm sure all of you are aware of the referencing style. In social sciences, we usually follow IPS style, and which is the American Psychology Association. Edition 7 is what is being presently used. And I hope all of you are aware how to do it. If not, just go through APS style, and see that you get the referencing correctly. Your in-text referencing is also very important, as well as referencing at the end. Right? So these are consideration you should keep in mind, and figures and charts. I had my sister supervisor always used to say that looking at the quality of your figure, in which journal your paper will be selected. So if you have good, figures and charts, that will help you. That's one of the key in getting your, paper published. So always work towards creating, and I'm sure you'll have sessions toward learn visualization, learn, you know, telling your story. So, most of the times we don't always need great model. Sometimes the data can be told in the most effective way, very simply through charts and figures, and it gives wonderful messages. So, one should always aspire to create this kind of beautiful, you know, um, impactful, I would say, figures and charts, which are very important. So these are few of the main criteria that one should remember when you're doing on any good research. Right? Now, related to publications, um, and I hope every one of you, being faculties or research scholar, have to go through it. So just be careful about predatory journals. And I see a lot of young scholars many a times falling prey to it. And please get the journals verified with your faculties, with your, speak with others, know how it is. You can check on these publications. So they're basically predatory journals and journals which are not in Scopus, but they might be UGC yeah, listed as well. So few of them can be paid or free, and then among Scopus and Web of Sciences journals, you also have closed access and open access, right? So the key difference, and I'll very, quickly try to highlight. One is an open access. Now, open access, the idea here is that you have to pay an APC, which is your article processing charge. And the best part of it is that your article is available online for free for anyone to download it and cite it. Right, so this is the idea of open access. And for closed access, which is the traditional method, which you find in Science Direct or others, and most of the journals, that you can only see the abstract, right? And you cannot see anything beyond it unless you have a subscription to that journal. So these are closed access journals. Now, the difference, of course, or uh, and the factors that you should keep in mind when you're deciding whether to go for an open or closed access is uh, very simple things like visibility. So, when you are starting or sometimes, you want more, you ideally, we do not have much citations, right? So we want maybe to go for journals which are of open access so that more people can see your work and get access to it, and there are more downloads, and you know how H-index work, right? So you have more citations, and that's how now evaluation is done. So how much your paper or your work is impacting and helping others, and how they being cited. So that's a very important criterion. And also an important aspect is cost, because open access would ideally have a very high, much higher uh, charges, right? So there is some submission. Sometimes some of these journals have publication submission charges, but usually the APC is much higher. Suppose in the range from 8 to 5,000. So many of these good journals come in the range of 3,000 to $4,000. So it comes at a lot of cost. So whether your institute is able to fund that, or or how do you fund your research? So I started with telling you about that the costing aspect of it, right? So that is also very important. So whether you have the means for it is an important criteria. There is, unfortunately or fortunately, some stigma related to it. Like, many of the places, if you publish in open access, people would not value much, but there are like very good open access journals. But it is a matter of prestige that your paper or work is in closed access, right? And it takes a lot of time, and and you feel that that work is done more. And few universities I heard abroad who who do not give much value to open access journals. It's unfortunate, but that is also sometimes possible. And the speed, very important, because we all are under so much of stress. Everyone is stressing about getting publication. Now, these open access journals, the good ones, would ideally take much lesser time, because there are people, who in the editorial board, who are like just into editorial services. So then they're not professors who are working. So the swiftness with which your papers are reviewed are much higher. And I recently had an experience with Frontiers, in which our paper, of course, we had very minor reviews. Um, and within 2 months, our entire review process was done. It came online in 3 months, and it was, published. But it was open access, and we had a very good experience. And it was one of the first experience. And there are journals in closed access where, you get a review after 2 years, and you get a rejection after 2 years. So, you can understand the frustration, and anyone who has gone through would relate to what I'm trying to say. So these are a few of the benefits, but it also comes at a cost. So decide on the things that should, and you should be careful about it. The other very important concern, and this stems from the fact that there's so much of pressure on publication, is people falling prey to this predatory journals. Now, uh, here is one journal in which you find the list. It's Bell's list of predatory journals and publishers. If you go through it, I've just given you a screenshot. You can easily find what are the predatory journals. Um, the other thing is that it's very easy. Sometimes it's not always easy, but there are certain signs you should be very careful, and they give you that idea that it is predatory. So there is no standard identifiers. The ISN, DOIs are missing, and you'll see, the scope of that journal is very wide. That's a clear identification. You'll find journals where you have management, you have like suppose economics, engineering, everything under one roof. That's too generic, and those are clearly, you can very well understand that those would be predatory. Um, Proper, journals would have a niche area, right? And poor online presence, of course. There will be grammatical errors and citation scores and all. And also the indexing. Good journals would, of course, be indexed, and you would want it to be indexed in Scopus or Clogy, or at least Web of Sciences, UGC Care. So always go to, and please don't fall prey to this, like, okay, publication done in 3 days, publication done in 5 days, 10 days. These are clear indicators of predatory journals. Now, when you're selecting, try to select journals in which the your work and the scope of that journal is in tune. Many remarkable high impact work face rejection because the journal that they are sending to is not in tune with the scope of the journal. So suppose you have a financial inclusion paper, or some paper related to health, and you send it to a very generic a journal, they would not suggest. But if you send it to exactly the area that you're working on, there is very high chances that you get a reviewer also of that same area, and you get good suggestions, and it is published. So selecting the correct journal is also very important. Go through the author's guideline, every journal have that, and look at the time of publication, right? So it's very important that you see the uh, you know uh, the frequency of publication. So whether it is published twice a year, or it is biannual, biannually or monthly, what is the frequency, right? So that also gives you a good idea about how long it is going to take for your paper to be published. And of course, impact factors, these are important. The peer review process, right? How it is being done, and indexation, very important. Select papers which are well indexed, in these criterias. acceptance rate, you can all check through this. So I'll just give you a few suggestions of where you can find and how you can find. So journal finder, these are LVSIR. So go to the LVSIR site. There is a journal finder option. You can select and mention your abstract, and from there they will find for you the correct journals, right? So this is a very good way of identifying what is the current journal for you. These are for LVSIR journals. Another very important and widely used is this SCI. So this gives you the papers, the journals which are indexed in Scopus, in Web of Sciences, which are open access also. So there are different ways of filtering. So you can select the subject area, economics, econometrics, region-wise, type-wise, year-wise, and then you see there's a download data option. So you can actually get an Excel of all the important journals in your area, right? Based on if you want web of sciences or you want open access, everything. They give you this information, they give you the H index, they give you anything. Any website, if you see a journal name, please cross verify it with Echo, right? And with it, you also get additional information. I don't think I have the time, otherwise I would have shown you, in the website. Just go and search, like, if you just go and select this quarterly journal of economics, it gives you in depth, like where is, that journal, what is the origin of the country of the journal, the H index of the journal, from till when, like the coverage, ISBN. It gives you in detail, like what is the citation, the total documents, and international collaboration. This gives you idea, see, how the citation has increased. So whether these gives you idea about how well the journal is doing, because even these journals are also reviewed. So one paper, you have submitted, maybe it was Scopus index then, but the journal is not doing well, there has been issues, and then it get discontinued. So you get an idea, and by the time your paper gets published, it is no longer in Scopus. It happens to many of us. So always look at the trend, like how the paper is doing. Right. So look at the collaboration, look at the citations, look at overall, how well the paper is. And you can also understand in what quantile that paper lies, like whether it's a Q1 journal, it's a Q2 journal, which quantile, Q3, Q4. So you get this entire information here. So always check your journals here. Even for Springer also, you have find the right journal for you. These kind of services are easily available. Springer, you also get call for papers. So there's a section in which you can browse and find call for papers, find community, how to publish an article step by step. You can browse by the subject that you have, right? And this would give you the a general idea of how to go forward it, and of course with experience and guidance from the seniors, your collaborators, and your research, your PhD supervisors. um, I hope we are able to do more impactful and meaningful research. So with this, I'll stop for today, and we are open to more discussion and clarification from any of you. Okay, thank you. This is my mail ID, and also I'm actively available in LinkedIn and other social media platforms as well.
Thank you, Dr. Sakhi, for this comprehensive discussion on a very, very fundamental topic. So I would like to, I think we are running out of time, but still we'll take 10 more minutes to have a question answer session. So I would like this participant to be very precise on the questions. So the floor is open for question answer session. I will take around 10 minutes. If you have any questions, you can raise your hands or you can drop them in the chat box so that we can have a discussion. Anyone? Yogesh is asking if you can share the PPT.
I'll maybe discuss with the organizers and how they take it forward. We can discuss accordingly. So I don't know whether they'll be sharing the recording or the material, but this
Yes, we are going to share the recording after the finishing of this workshop. We will upload all the videos one by one on our YouTube channel, Jammu and Kashmir Economic Association. So yes, over to you, Professor Rubina.
There's one question, ma'am, for you.
Yeah,
From Just Kiran Kaur. So the question is, what is the difference between bibliography and references, ma'am?
yeah. So I think that's a very relevant question. So, in bibliographies, what we do is, and it is usually for report writing and other places, it is about all the sources, right? So that is, used in your research, right? And in references, what we mention is, and it's usually in the publication, like in paper form, in when you're publishing in um, journals, right? So the term is more of references, right? So it's more about the difference in the format in which you're writing. So bibliography is more when you're writing reports or in dissertations, and references is more it's relevant more when you're uh, writing for journals. So journals, they want the terminology is more of references. There are other uh, uh, minute differences, but this is broadly the difference. Like in bibliography, sometimes you also refer to other theses, other journals, and especially when you're writing dissertations. So all of that goes into bibliography. But when you're writing for a journal, it's very precise and concise, and all the only the relevant papers that you've referred to, or books. That is what we mention in mostly in references. It's much more concise that way.
Okay. Any more questions?
Excuse me, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. I would like to ask one question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Ma'am, in my research topic, which is a very new topic, so I'm facing this issue that on Google Scholar, there are very few papers are being that are for the open access. Most of the papers are being written in 2022 or 23. So from where can I get the information or get the paper? So because my research area is also from secondary based. So for that, I need a good LR, a literature review. So
Yeah.
apart from the Google Scholar, and my background is from the finance. So from which other
Yeah.
sources I can get the paper access?
Yeah, so I think you should also not just look at Google Scholar, even the Scopus, sites, you can refer to in related to finance. But the understanding here is, you would not find ideally much literature. So try to, when you're writing in your literature review, as I've also mentioned for the ones before, try to bring out what from where that area is coming from. So if you're introducing two new areas into it, suppose digitalization, I'm not sure about maybe if you can elaborate on your topic
So,
a bit.
yeah, so my topic is related to sustainability, and
Right.
my research area is about green total factor productivity and environmental
Right.
quality in G20 countries.
Right. You will find materials. Um, in the sense you search, I don't know what are the keywords you're using. Like in your case, there are many important keywords. So one should also understand and write about sustainability, how that sustainability is being used in the idea of finance. Traditionally, how was finance looked at? What is the concept of green finance? What are the advances in green finance? How is accounting being done? What are the changes in that accounting? So you bring in that contradictions that will help you in structuring your literature review, and you will find enough. I'm sure you'll eventually find more papers. What I also suggest students is whenever you're looking at secondary data sources, is suppose we have data like NFHs or IHDS. So I tell students to subscribe to the IHDS newsletters. So any publication that is done, new publications that are done by IHDS, you get a notification in your mail. So all good papers, any papers that are done by IHDS, you will get the link to it. So these are ways, to keep in touch, and search in Scopus and other places, Elvisa, because Google Scholar, I know there are many limitations. You always would not get like good papers. Try and search with other keywords. So you have many keywords, right? Look at other keywords, look at the paper that you're referring to, any of the new papers, and from there look at the references. What have they worked on? And that helps you. And I'm one of my students actually worked in that area, so I know like you will get a few of you'll get her data. Also refer, many of the times what happens is a new area that is coming up, you don't have publications, but you have very good reports in that area. So
Correct,
there will
ma'am.
be many international reports, in that area by many of the environmental bodies or government reports. And you can very well refer to those reports as well.
Sure. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank
Shall we take one more question, or shall we?
Well, it's fine. Like, I can take one more.
One last question, and then we can have that through LinkedIn or email. So
Yeah.
Abhishek asked if there is any other plagiarism check software for individual use.
Plagiarism, I think Turnitin is what we normally use. And please speak with your university. I think most of universities will have access to it. And check it through your university, through your library. If you don't have it, I think some of my students sometimes use, I think, duplicate checker or something you can check like online there are. But the problem is, like, even in this checking, and with the advent of AI, it's not just about plagiarism, it's also about, how much is the AI score of your work. And most of the time, you don't have um, plagiarism, but it's almost like very high amount of AI score. So to keep a balance between them, so there are online few of them, through which you can check. But Turnitin is what, like, traditionally in academics, that is what we use.
Okay, I think that we are running out of time. So there are some questions. I would suggest the participant to please connect ma'am through LinkedIn or email her so that we
Mhm.
can address all the questions. Because we have to wind it up right now, and because we have another session coming up at 4:30. Therefore, I'd like to end the session formally. So I thank Dr. Sakhi Roy for this amazing and insightful lecture today, on such a fundamental topic. So before starting going through other sessions from tomorrow onwards and hereafter, we definitely require this basic knowledge about how we should do research or conduct research in social sciences. So I would thank Dr. Sakhi Roy for today's session, and I would also like to thank Dr. Firdos and all the organizers for allowing me to be a moderator for today's session. So thank you all the participants for your time and for listening to Dr. Sakhi very, very carefully. So thank you very much, Dr. Sakhi, and
Thank
bye-bye.
you. Thank you, Rubina, for that wonderful moderation. So you have been throughout and very wonderfully highlighted the key areas.